We now move to topical questions. Question number 1, Christine Grahame.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. No questions on flooding would be quite so attractive. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on its flood prevention programme.
Minister Paul Wheelhouse.
The Scottish Government is working with partners to implement the Flood Risk Management Scotland Act 2009, which is the most substantial change to flooding legislation in 50 years. It helps ensure that communities and businesses across Scotland benefit from a modern and sustainable approach to flood management that is suited to the needs of the 21st century and to addressing the increasing impact of climate change.
Christine Grahame.
Can I thank the Minister for his answer? Can I refer him to the answer to question 06436 by Derek Mackay on the 19th of April, in which I note the Scottish Borders Council made an application for nearly £3.5 million for flood prevention schemes in Galashiels at Plumtree, Wilderhorn, Netherdale. Was their application successful?
Minister.
I can confirm to the member the scheme will receive support from the Scottish Government up to 80% of the total costs via the General Capital Grant to local authorities. The current estimated total cost of the scheme is £3.6 million. And that's hopefully able to answer the member's question.
Ms Grahame.
Well, thank you, Presiding Officer. However, that's fine for local authorities, but I'm an individual who runs a very successful business at Flotterson Inn in Midlothian, but too regularly his inn is flooded, and it's almost impossible to get who are the proprietors round about who are liable. What can he do? How can he access any flood prevention schemes other than just coming to his MSP to try to get help?
Minister.
It's a fair point that Christine Grahame makes. It's certainly difficult to comment on individual cases when you don't know the full detail, but in general, flooding from one area on a private property to another should be resolved by negotiation with parties concerned. However, I'd be happy to comment further on the details of the case if the member would agree to write to me about it.
Annabel Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I would like to thank the Minister for coming to Comrie this morning, further to the very serious flooding that we witnessed yesterday. It was very much appreciated, Minister, by the village that you came and you listened. Can I ask you to undertake to speak with the Chief Executive of Perth and Kinross Council by the end of this week and secure from her a firm commitment as to the actual start date of the remedial work that has already been identified? Minister.
Certainly, I'd just like to say to the member, I had a very productive conversation with Bernadette Malone on Monday regarding the situation in Comrie. I'm certainly glad to visit Comrie today to hear directly from members of the community about the impacts on them, and I certainly recognise the severity of the impact on the village, and to have 2 floods within a short period of time has obviously had a substantial impact on the community. I will certainly undertake to speak again to Bernadette Malone again about the options available and the time scale that they are facing for remedial works to be undertaken, and to write back to the member on the outcome of that meeting.
Julian McGregor.
Thank you. In the light of continued landslides and blockage of the A83 at the Rest and Be Thankful, which have been going on since 2007, recently exacerbated by heavy rain, when is the relief road due to be completed? On the 19th of July, in reply to my written question S4W08320, the Transport Minister said work will be commenced in August and completed by November. Well, it's now the 20th of November, no sign of completion. Will the Minister apologise on behalf of the Government to those people and businesses in Argyll and Bute affected by these continual closures, and will he give an explanation as to why the promise given has been broken, and give them and me an update on any progress that has been made towards a completion date for the relief road to keep this vital lifeline road open?
The member knows that this is about flood prevention. I expect it to be a bit more focused on the rain that's fallen over the last few days. I'm sure the Transport Minister will answer that question in due course, and there is no need for the Minister to do so. I now call Claudia Beamish.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To further ask the Minister what discussions it has had in relation to its flood prevention programme with local authorities, the police and fire services, particularly in the Borders, building on Christine Grahame's question, as I represent part of the Borders, a part of my area of the south of Scotland.
Minister.
As I said earlier on, in response to a previous question, obviously the implementation of the Flood Risk Management Scotland Act 2009 does offer an opportunity for the first time to take a strategic view of flood prevention measures in Scotland and to target resources and prioritise targeting resources on those areas at most risk. I'm certainly aware of the number of areas in the borders that are vulnerable to flooding or measured as PVAs in the flood risk management plan, and clearly the fact that we are agreeing to fund the scheme in Gala Shields should be welcomed by all people in the borders, but I'm certainly happy to have a discussion with Claudia Beamish on what more we can do in relation to flood matters in the borders.
Bruce Crawford.
Aware that in the village of Aberfoyle was similarly inundated this week with floodwaters, and a number of businesses were impacted upon. Not the first time in the last few years that's happened. I wonder if the Minister would be happy to have a discussion with me about what best could be done together with Stirling Council to alleviate matters for Aberfoyle, because these are important businesses who provide lifeline jobs in that area in terms of the economy, particularly since it's based on tourism.
Minister.
I'm certainly more than happy to discuss the issues in Aberfoyle with Bruce Crawford. I certainly appreciate, having seen for myself at first hand the impact that flooding has had in Comrie, just how similarly in the context of Aberfoyle the perceived risk to business and individuals going forward could be quite damaging to confidence in a community. So I'm more than happy to meet with the member and see what more we can do for the people of Aberfoyle.
Calvin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd like to ask the Minister what guidelines are in place to ensure that Scottish Water deals with regular flooding from sewers, such as in the Merchant Quarter in Aberdeen.
Minister.
In terms of Kevin Stewart's point, I'm aware that my colleague, the Cabinet Secretary for Infrastructure, is looking at issues in relation to Merchant Quarter in Aberdeen and has responsibility for Scottish Water. I'm sure if the member writes to my colleague, the Cabinet Secretary, she would be more than happy to address the point he raised.
Question number 2, Hugh Henry.
To ask the Scottish Government when the Cabinet Secretary for Education and Lifelong Learning first became aware that there would be a reduction in college budgets for 2012-13.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Russell.
Presiding Officer, with your permission, I first wish to apologise to the whole Chamber for the answer I gave to Mr Malik on the 28th of June. I said there was no reduction in college funding for colleges in financial year 2012-13. However, when you include all budget revisions, the revised 2012-13 budget is £9.3 million lower than the previous year. I should have immediately recognised that the answer I gave was not right. I did not. I apologise for that to the whole Chamber, and in particular to Mr Malik. Turning to Mr Henry's question, as members know, I wrote to the convener of the Education and Culture Committee on 18th October, setting out the accurate budget figures, including all revisions. This, I hope, reassures members that my answer to Mr Malik was a genuine mistake. The figures for college budgets, originally published as part of the spending review in September 2011, have of course been revised at various points since then as a result of budget decisions by this Parliament. These revisions have sought to help the college sector by adding additional funding to the baseline budget in both 2011-12 and 2012-13. I shall go on seeking ways to help in year, as I always have. As the First Minister has set out, last week's inaccurate information was based not on an overstatement of spending in 2012-13, but on an understatement of spending in 2011-12. But let me be clear, even after this additional funding was added in, the revised revenue budget is still falling. I acknowledged this in my evidence to the Education Committee on 23rd October, in the debate last week, and I do so here again today. At the weekend, Presiding Officer Larry Flanagan of the EIS encouraged all of us to focus on the substantive issues facing colleges, including funding. On that basis, I welcome the proposed debate this Thursday on Scotland's colleges and the regionalisation process currently underway. But let me make clear again that my apology is full and unreserved. It is to the whole Chamber, including to Mr Henry. It should not have happened.
Hugh Henry.
Presiding Officer, there should have been a full statement by Mike Russell. Apologising in this way, I believe, shows a real contempt for the Scottish Parliament. Can I ask, Presiding Officer, that you release to MSPs the original letter of apology sent to you by Mike Russell? The Ministerial Code, Presiding Officer...
Can I just say, Mr Henry, this is a question to the Cabinet Secretary. If you've got a further question to the Cabinet Secretary, please do so. In relation to letters that are sent to me, that is not for me to release them. That would be for the Minister himself. But if you could now concentrate on a question to the Cabinet Secretary, I would be grateful, and so would the rest of the Chamber, who are waiting to hear from you.
Well, certainly, Presiding Officer. The Ministerial Code says that any inadvertent errors should be corrected at the earliest opportunity. Mike Russell misled the Scottish Parliament in June, despite knowing the true figures since February. Why has it taken him 5 months to apologise?
Cabinet Secretary, I think that was a question for you.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In terms of Mr Henry's request for a statement, I have indicated not only am I responding to this question and issuing a full and unreserved apology, there will also be a full debate at the request of the Liberal Democrats on Thursday, at which we will have the opportunity to debate all the issues surrounding college funding and all the issues surrounding regionalisation. I shall be entirely open in that debate as I am now. Can I say that matters of the Ministerial Code are not for me? Those, of course, are matters for the First Minister.
Mr Henry?
Presiding Officer, I didn't ask why the Ministerial Code hadn't been applied. The question I asked was why had it taken the Cabinet Secretary 5 months to apologise, and he has just ignored that. But, Presiding Officer, the Ministerial Code also says that ministers who knowingly mislead Parliament will be expected to resign. Mike Russell knew in June he had misled this Parliament when he said there is no reduction in funding in 2012-13. He then knowingly misled this Parliament again last Wednesday when he said, "I have never said that there were no cuts." He has knowingly misled this Parliament not once, but twice. Presiding Officer, why has Mike Russell not offered his resignation?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the answer I gave on the 28th of June was given in good faith. I have apologised for that answer as it was erroneous. I have apologised twice for that answer in this statement, and I apologise again for that answer. It was certainly given in good faith. In terms of the debate and discussion of this issue, I made it clear last week, and I said so in my statement, I made clear in my evidence on the 23rd of October, and I do so here again, that I have always acknowledged that the budget would fall over the spending review period. That is what I said, and that is why I have worked so hard to get in-year additions within the budget. And those in-year revisions have been designed to try and help the situation. I shall continue to seek those.
Liz Smith.
Cabinet Secretary, in the First Minister's statement on Thursday, he produced a revised baseline figure for 2011-12 of £556 million instead of the £545 million which was quoted in the Audit Scotland report. Could the Cabinet Secretary confirm that this amended baseline figure is correct and that it therefore means that the college budget has actually suffered a cut of more than 24% in real terms?
Cabinet Secretary.
If I can confirm the first part of that, which is to say the figure is correct, but also to say, and I've indicated in my statement too, and I do so again now, there have been in-year revisions. For example, the figure in the following year was raised by, I think, £39.5 million, and there's continued revisions taking place for next year. And indeed, in the figures issued to the Education Committee, those are indicated, and it is also indicated that there remain sums which have not yet been allocated, which I would hope to allocate to the college sector after discussion. So I am happy to confirm that the figure 555, I think 555.7, is accurate, but I continue to seek in-year revisions, as I have always done, in order to make sure that as much as possible is spent in the college sector.
Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the Cabinet Secretary's remarks today following those from the First Minister on Thursday, apologising for the inaccurate figure presented to Parliament. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm that the corrected figure for 2011-12 indicates that the Scottish Government actually spent more on colleges in the year 2011-12 than was indicated by the uncorrected figure?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, as I made clear in my answer, last week's inaccurate information was based not on an overstatement of spending in 2012-13, but on an understatement of spending in 2011-12. That understatement of spending, I think, was in the nature of £9.3 million. That is the cause, that is the figures at the root of this matter, and it is indeed an understatement of what we actually spent on the college sector. I think, and I continue to say, I offer my sincere apology, particularly to Mr Malik, but I do think that that does place a context to these figures which at least needs to be understood.
Neil Bibby.
Last Thursday, as the First Minister was misleading Parliament at question time, TV viewers could see... Last Thursday, as the First Minister was misleading Parliament at question time, TV viewers could also see Mike Russell nodding vigorously in support of the First Minister's answers to Joanne Lamont. Presiding Officer, why was Mike Russell nodding so enthusiastically when he knew the figures being quoted were wrong?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I can only say to Mr Bibby what I have said to the whole Chamber, and I repeat. And I said that this was a genuine mistake that was made. I apologise for that genuine mistake that was made. I am sorry. I'm sorry that that apology has not been accepted as yet by members of the Labour Party, but that apology is meant for them as well as for everybody else in this Chamber.
Ian MacArthur.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I welcome the Cabinet Secretary's concession of a debate, a further debate on Thursday this week, but I would perhaps repeat the question from Neil Bibby as to why it was that he was nodding vigorously throughout First Minister's questions when he knew those figures were wrong. And in light of your comments, Presiding Officer, would the Cabinet Secretary perhaps clarify whether he is willing to release the letter that he sent to you at the end of last week?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I shall certainly consider that matter, Presiding Officer, but I just want to make I would just like to make it absolutely clear, and I'm grateful that the member has acknowledged the apology that I've made to him and to the whole Chamber. But I hope he would recognise that this was a genuine mistake. The debate which he has called for, I am entirely happy to take part in. During that debate, we will have the chance to discuss a whole range of issues around regionalisation, but I would remind him, as I remind the Chamber again, of the words of Larry Flanagan of the EAS, who encouraged all of us to focus on the substantive issues facing colleges. That is, I believe, what we should do, and that's what I'm going to try to do.
Neil Findlay.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary can pretend that he didn't know, but on the radio this morning, of course, Mr Swinney told us he did know and did nothing to stop the First Minister misleading Parliament. Can I also say that, Presiding Officer, Mike Russell told the Education...
Can we get a question, please, Mr Findlay?
Coming to my question, on the 21st of October, that he had looked at the college budget figures and I quote, front ways, back ways, sideways and upside down. Why did he just not look at them straightforwardly and honestly?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Presiding Officer, I had provided the member, as a member of the Education Committee, and all members of the Education Committee, with the accurate figures. They were provided in a letter dated the 18th of October. I acknowledged the fact that the funding was falling over the spending review period in my evidence to that committee, and having reread that evidence to the committee, it is quite clear that I was and remain at pains to have a full discussion of the issues of college funding and the way in which we can take forward what are necessary but difficult reforms in the sector. I apologise for this mistake. I also apologise for the effect it will have on debating this, a fact that Larry Flanagan has drawn attention to, but I am very keen that we continue to debate seriously the changes that must take place in Scotland's college sector in order to focus on the needs and opportunities for young people.
Gavin Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary has said several times today there was no overstatement of the 12-13 budget. That figure of £546 million relies upon a sum of £13 million entitled College Places SDS. Independent sources suggest that £13 million is actually split over 2 years, £8 million in 12-13 and £5 million in 11-12. One of the independent sources being the Scottish Government's own budget revision document. Can the Cabinet Secretary categorically assure us that not a penny of that £13 million was spent in a year other than 12-13?
Cabinet Secretary.
Mr Brown has to recognise that when dealing with the college sector, and also with the university sector, there's a difference between academic years and financial years. That is reflected within the figures, but the figures as provided are accurate figures.
George Adam, take it your questions about college funding.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Presiding Officer. I think I'll take Lanny Flanagan's advice in the EIS and actually talk about education. But can the Cabinet Secretary confirm the number of FTE Scottish college students in higher education level courses benefiting from the Scottish Government's policy of free tuition, while their peers south of the border pay fees of over £6,000 per year on average?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I'm informed by the Student Awards Agency for Scotland that students paid, there are 26,335 students studying HE levels courses at a college in 2011-12. They would be the ones who would be adversely affected by any change in the fee regime.
That ends topical questions. The next